You think being accommodating makes people respect you. You think being agreeable makes people value you. You think being helpful makes people appreciate you. Here's the brutal truth that's going to shatter your worldview. The kinder you are, the more vulnerable you become to exploitation, manipulation, and outright abuse. While you're busy being nice, psychological predators are scanning for exactly these behaviors, identifying you as the perfect target for their next manipulation. And you have no idea it's happening. What I'm about to reveal comes from forensic psychology research, spanning 30 years of studying how manipulators select their targets. Studies show that 94% of people display these five behaviors thinking they're being kind, when they're actually painting a target on their back. You can either learn to recognize these five dangerous kind behaviors and protect yourself, or you can continue being the person everyone knows they can exploit without consequences. Let's start with the most dangerous behavior, something you probably did today thinking it made you a good person. But before I reveal the first vulnerability creating behavior, ask yourself, have you ever felt taken advantage of despite being nice to everyone? Your answer connects directly to our first point. Behavior 1. Automatic agreement. The first vulnerability creating kindness is reflexive agreement. Saying yes to requests, accommodating others' preferences, and avoiding conflict, all to maintain harmony and appear cooperative. You think you're being easygoing and helpful, but research from Harvard's Department of Social Psychology reveals that consistent agreement without boundaries activates predatory recognition patterns in manipulative individuals. In a landmark study, participants who displayed high agreeableness were 3.7 times more likely to be targeted for exploitation in negotiation scenarios and 4.2 times more likely to receive unfair treatment in resource allocation exercises. I observed a colleague who prided himself on being a team player by agreeing to every request. Within 6 months, his workload had doubled while his recognition decreased by half. His kindness wasn't rewarded. It was systematically exploited. When you automatically agree to others' requests, you're not being kind. You're training people that your boundaries are optional and your needs are secondary. You're literally programming others to see you as a resource rather than a person. The protection alternative, selective agreement. Thoughtfully consider requests before responding. Let me think about that and get back to you becomes your new default response. Think about someone you deeply respect. Do they automatically say yes to everything? Or do they do something entirely different? The second behavior reveals itself in how you respond to mistreatment, creating a dangerous pattern that escalates over time. Behavior 2. Excusing mistreatment. The second vulnerability creating kindness is mistreatment rationalization, making excuses for others' poor behavior, attributing negative actions to external circumstances rather than character or intention. They're just having a bad day. They didn't mean it that way. It's not that big a deal. You think you're being understanding and compassionate. But research from Columbia University's Psychological Resilience Department found that individuals who consistently rationalize mistreatment experience a 58% increase in boundary violations over time and report 64% higher levels of relationship dissatisfaction. A client consistently excused her partner's dismissive comments as just his communication style. Over 3 years, this behavior escalated from occasional rudeness to regular verbal abuse as she had inadvertently trained him that disrespect carried no consequences. When you excuse mistreatment, you're not being understanding. You're establishing a pattern of what you'll tolerate, and that pattern typically escalates. Psychological research confirms a simple truth. Behavior that is rewarded will continue and intensify. The protection alternative, accurate attribution. Acknowledge patterns of behavior for what they are. That comment was disrespectful, and I don't accept that kind of treatment. Have you noticed how certain people seem to attract respectful treatment while others constantly deal with disrespect? The difference isn't personality, it's boundaries. The third behavior appears in how you handle your own needs, systematically training others that your requirements don't matter. Behavior 3, need suppression. The third vulnerability creating kindness is need minimization, consistently downplaying, hiding, or denying your own requirements, preferences, and desires to accommodate others. You think you're being selfless and considerate. But research from Stanford's Psychological Well-Being Institute shows that consistent need suppression creates what researchers call exploitation readiness, a state that manipulative individuals can detect and target with remarkable accuracy. Brain imaging studies reveal that chronic need suppressors show altered activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the same pattern observed in individuals with heightened vulnerability to coercive control. I worked with a professional who never expressed preferences about project timelines, workload distribution, or even basic comfort needs like temperature or break times. Within months, she was assigned impossible deadlines, the most difficult tasks, and was regularly interrupted during her lunch break for quick questions. When you suppress your needs, you're not being selfless. You're systematically erasing your requirements from others' awareness and decision making processes. You're training the world that your needs are optional considerations rather than necessary boundaries. The protection alternative, appropriate need expression. State your requirements clearly and directly. I need X to complete this effectively becomes a regular part of your communication. The next behavior might seem completely harmless, even virtuous, but it's actually creating a dangerous vulnerability that manipulators can spot from a mile away. Behavior 4, excessive self disclosure. The fourth vulnerability creating kindness is premature transparency. Sharing personal information, weaknesses, traumas, and insecurities too quickly in relationships. You think you're being authentic and building connection, but research from the University of Toronto's Relationship Psychology Department found that early self disclosure creates exploitable vulnerability maps that manipulative individuals use with tactical precision. In a controlled study, participants who disclosed personal vulnerabilities within the first 3 interactions were 72% more likely to be targeted for emotional manipulation and 58% more likely to remain in exploitative relationships. A business professional shared her insecurities about public speaking during her first team meeting. For the next year, she was systematically excluded from presentation opportunities despite her expertise, while her disclosures were occasionally used as subtle punchlines in group settings. When you overshare prematurely, you're not building authentic connection. You're providing a detailed blueprint of exactly how you can be controlled, manipulated, and exploited. You're handing over the psychological keys to your most vulnerable spaces before establishing if the other person is trustworthy. The protection alternative, graduated disclosure. Share personal information progressively as trust is established and reciprocated. Vulnerability should be earned, not freely given. We've covered 4 behaviors that create dangerous vulnerability, but the fifth is by far the most destructive because it fundamentally alters how others perceive your value and worth. Behavior 5, constant availability. The fifth and most dangerous vulnerability creating kindness is perpetual accessibility. Being consistently available regardless of personal cost, responding immediately to messages, dropping everything for others' needs, and having no protected time or space. You think you're being helpful and responsive, but organizational psychology research from UCLA found that constant availability creates what researchers call value diminishment, a psychological devaluation process where what is always available becomes perceived as inherently less valuable. In a workplace study, individuals with the highest response rates and availability were rated 47% lower in perceived importance and 53% lower in promotion potential, despite equal or superior performance. A consultant prided himself on being available to clients 24/7. Rather than appreciating this sacrifice, clients began making increasingly unreasonable demands, contacting him at all hours for non urgent matters, and expressing frustration when he occasionally couldn't respond immediately. When you're constantly available, you're not being dedicated. You're communicating that your time has no value, your boundaries don't exist, and your priorities are subordinate to everyone else's emergencies. You're training others to see your accessibility as an entitlement rather than a gift. The protection alternative, strategic availability. Establish clear parameters around when and how you can be reached. I'm available during these hours or I check messages at these times becomes your standard practice. Now that you understand these 5 vulnerability creating behaviors, let's explore the psychology behind genuine kindness that doesn't compromise your security. The solution, boundaried benevolence. The solution to this paradox lies in what psychologists call boundaried benevolence, the ability to be genuinely kind without creating exploitable vulnerabilities. The ancient Stoics understood this perfectly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." Applied to modern interactions, this means being generous and kind from a position of self protection, not self sacrifice. Psychological research confirms this wisdom. A comprehensive study from Berkeley's Social Dynamics Lab found that individuals who combined warmth with clear boundaries were rated 89% higher in respect metrics and reported 76% higher relationship satisfaction than those who displayed warmth without boundaries. True kindness comes from strength, not weakness. It's an intentional choice made from a position of security, not a desperate attempt to earn approval by making yourself vulnerable. Let me give you practical examples of how to transform these 5 behaviors into their protection-enhancing alternatives. Instead of automatically agreeing, try, "That's an interesting request. Let me consider if it works for me and get back to you tomorrow." Rather than excusing mistreatment, say, "I understand you're frustrated, but speaking to me that way isn't acceptable." Instead of suppressing needs, state, "For this to work, I'll need adequate time and resources. Here's what that looks like." Rather than oversharing, practice, "As we get to know each other better, I'll share more about my experiences in that area." Instead of constant availability, establish, "I check messages between 9 and 10 a.m. and 3 and 4 p.m. For genuine emergencies, here's how to reach me." These alternatives maintain kindness while protecting you from exploitation. The psychology behind these changes reveals a fundamental truth about human social dynamics that most people never learn: the psychology of vulnerability. The fundamental principle at work here is what psychologists call exploitation detection, the unconscious process by which manipulative individuals scan for specific behavioral patterns that signal exploitability. Research from Columbia's social psychology department found that manipulators can identify vulnerability cues with 93% accuracy within the first 5 minutes of interaction, often before their targets have spoken more than a few sentences. This explains why these 5 kind behaviors create such consistent vulnerability. They don't signal generosity or compassion to manipulative individuals. They signal that you've already decided your boundaries, needs, and protection are less important than being perceived as nice. The most important insight is understanding the crucial difference between kindness and vulnerability. The kindness-protection balance. The critical distinction that most people miss is between true kindness and self-endangerment. Genuine kindness comes from a position of security and choice, not from compromising your safety or dignity. Psychological research from Harvard Business School found that the most respected and effective leaders scored high on both warmth and strength metrics, while those who displayed warmth without boundaries were consistently rated lowest in effectiveness and influence. The protection-enhancing alternative isn't to become unkind. It's to be kind from a foundation of security. This means being generous without being exploitable, helpful without being depleted, and compassionate without being controlled. When you approach kindness from this balanced perspective, you don't increase your vulnerability. You enhance your impact. You demonstrate the rare combination of warmth and strength that naturally commands respect while deflecting exploitation. Let me leave you with a practical framework for implementing these changes in your daily interactions. Implementation strategy. The most effective approach to transforming these behaviors is what psychologists call incremental boundary implementation, making small, consistent changes rather than dramatic personality shifts. This week, identify which of these 5 behaviors you engage in most frequently. Choose one specific alternative response and practice it consistently. Notice how people react differently to you. When you face resistance, and you will, remember that you're breaking patterns that may have existed for years. The discomfort is temporary, but the protection is permanent. The key insight is understanding that kindness and protection are not opposing forces. They're complementary qualities that reinforce each other when properly balanced. True kindness isn't about making yourself vulnerable. It's about creating positive impact while maintaining your security. When you stop these 5 self-endangering behaviors, you don't become less kind. You become more respected and better protected. And remember, genuine respect isn't earned through vulnerability. It's commanded through boundaried benevolence. If you found this video helpful, hit subscribe for more content on psychological dynamics and social influence. Keep checking back daily for more pragmatic principles. And drop a comment below, share your own personal experience. See you in the next video.